On the night of October 8, 1871, the deadliest wildfire in American history burned through 17 towns in northeastern Wisconsin. Between 1,500 and 2,500 people died. Whole families, entire communities, gone in hours. You almost certainly don't know that, because that same night, a fire broke out in Chicago. The town of Peshtigo sat at the edge of the Wisconsin frontier, a company town built on lumber, carved out of old-growth forest, still raw and new in 1871. The summer had been brutal, no rain for months. Small fires had been burning in the surrounding brush for weeks. Nobody thought much of them. They were just part of life at the timber's edge. Nobody imagined what dry forest plus drought plus a hard southwest wind could become. On the evening of October 8th, the wind shifted. What came out of that forest was not a fire. It was a firestorm, a phenomenon where the heat becomes so intense it creates its own weather, its own wind, its own vortex. Temperatures reached an estimated 2,000 degrees. Iron wagon wheels melted into the road. Sand on the riverbanks turned to glass. The fire moved faster than any horse could run. There was no warning, no time. A German immigrant farmer named Karl Lamp was eating supper with his wife Frederica and their 5 daughters when the sky turned orange. Frederica was heavily pregnant. Karl hitched the horses to the wagon, loaded his family, and handed Frederica the reins. The horses panicked and bolted toward Peshtigo, ahead of the flames. Karl ran after them. He was still running when the wall of fire overtook the wagon. He turned and watched his family burn. Then he threw himself into a shallow creek and lay in the water until morning. Karl Lamp was not the only one. There were entire families erased so completely that when survivors went looking for them afterward, there was nothing to find. Not ashes, not bones. The firestorm had consumed everything. The wind had blown even the ashes away. Father Peter Pernin was the Catholic priest of Peshtigo. When the fire came, he ran with his parishioners toward the river. He carried with him the church tabernacle, the consecrated vessel from his altar, because he could not bring himself to leave it behind. He waded into the river and held it above the water, while the fire burned around him and over him. He wrote later, "The air itself was on fire. Our heads were in continual danger. I saw nothing but immense volumes of flames covering the firmament, rolling one over the other with the violence of a tempest." He stood in that river through the night. When morning came, the town was gone. The tabernacle survived. It sits today in the Peshtigo Fire Museum, blackened, bent, intact. Those who lived gathered the dead as best they could. Many bodies were beyond recognition. Many had no bodies left to find. They buried what they had in a mass grave at the edge of town, hundreds of people, most of them unnamed, marked with a single small wooden cross. Word of the disaster didn't reach the governor's office for 2 days. The telegraph lines had burned. The nearest working line was 45 miles away. Governor Fairchild was already on a train to Chicago, carrying relief supplies for the fire there. His wife Frances heard the news first. She stopped a supply train headed for Chicago and rerouted it to Peshtigo. It was Frances Fairchild, not the governor, not the newspapers, not the nation, who turned to look. Chicago lost 300 people. Peshtigo lost somewhere between 1,500 and 2,500. Chicago got the front page. Chicago got the relief funds. Chicago got the place in history. And here is the thing I keep sitting with. Chicago had a reason to be remembered. It was a major American city with influence, infrastructure, and people with power who had every incentive to tell its story loudly. Peshtigo was a logging town on the frontier. It had no newspaper of its own. Its voice was Father Pernin, writing alone 3 years after the fire. That's not an accusation. That's just how memory works. Memory follows power. Memory follows infrastructure. Memory follows the people who are left to tell the story. Peshtigo lost so many of the people who would have told its story that the story nearly died with them. The town today calls itself the Forgotten Fire. They have a small museum, a mass grave with a wooden cross, a blackened tabernacle behind glass, and a winery called Forgotten Fire, because what else do you do when forgetting becomes your identity? I want to speak to the people in that grave. You were not abstractions. You were Carl Lamb running after a wagon. You were a 5-year-old named Elizabeth Wilkie, pulled into the river by her family. You were people who had come to the edge of the American frontier because you believed in something, in the work, in the land, in the life you were building. You didn't get a monument. You didn't get the front page. You got a wooden cross and a footnote. But the fire that erased you did not erase you completely, because the people who survive catastrophe and rebuild anyway, without recognition, without the nation's eyes on them, without anyone coming to tell their story, those people are not footnotes. They are the story. And the question that history never answered about Peshtigo isn't what caused the fire. It's this. How many other Peshtigos are there? How many other communities faced the worst thing, quietly, without cameras, without anyone coming to write it down, and rebuilt anyway, and were forgotten? I think the answer is more than we know, and I think that matters. We salute you, the people of Peshtigo, the ones in that grave and the ones who climbed out of the river and started over. You deserved to be remembered. At the last witness, trying.
The wind roared down from the timber like a carried judgment's hand, and before the dawn had reached us, there was fire across the land. The sky turned red above the tree line, and the smoke rolled thick and low, and we ran for what would hold us from a fire no one could slow. We ran for water, ran for mercy, ran for anything that hold. Father Pernin prayed beside us while the night burned white and gold. There were fathers calling children through the smoke and through the fear, and 1,000 souls in water wondered if the morning would appear. Tell me who remembers Peshtigo. Tell me who still speaks their names. While the whole world chased the city, we just disappeared in flames. And the years keep rolling onward like the waters to the sea. But I see faces in the river, and they're looking back at me. When the daylight found the shoreline, nothing stood that we could call a home. No church bells rang, no schoolhouse laughter, only ashes carried on the wind. There were fathers, there were daughters, there were names I've long forgot, lives that burned before their season, and a world that mourned them not. Father Pernin wrote the story so the world would understand, but he can't hold 1,000 lives for every lost and calloused hand. And every autumn when the cold wind blows and the leaves turn copper brown, I swear I hear the voices of those that never made it out. Tell me who remembers Peshtigo, tell me who still speaks their names. While the whole world chased the city, we just disappeared in flames. And someday I'll be with them, just another memory. But until then, all those faces stand